Alright, well, hello everyone. I'm just going to do a short little video here. Um, and in the background as I talk, I'm just going to let you watch this footage of what appears to be thermal drone footage of wild hogs. And I don't know specifically where this is, but I know hogs are becoming increasingly invasive and they're a real problem. And so there are a lot of people who really like hunting them, and they actually will do hunts where it's more of a cull than a real hunt, and they'll hunt them from helicopters and stuff like that. But typically, hog hunting, to my knowledge, is done at night, and often with thermal technology, either thermal scopes, which I'm into guns, so I'm interested in guns and gear. I don't actually have a thermal setup or anything right now because well, I haven't hunted in years, and this stuff's expensive. Although the price is coming down and it's much more affordable, and there's setups, that the end user can get. From what I understand, I don't know much about the context of this video, just from the titling of it and stuff, and what I was searching for. This appears to be probably commercial thermal drone footage. My guess would be that this particular drone and setup is something that if you have enough money you could just go out and buy something like this. And then there are thermal scopes and stuff like that, ranging from um, you know maybe $500 up to thousands and thousands of dollars, depending on the quality of the camera in it and all the extra features on the scope and things like that. This is technology that's available to civilians at this point in time. And if you just look at the quality of the video, it's pretty solid quality. Now, obviously, this drone isn't too far away from the targets that are being filmed and stuff like that. Anyway, the purpose of this video, you've probably noticed in my last couple that the persistent background audio hum has kind of come back. And I'm trying to diagnose that a little bit and tinker with my settings in OBS Studio, which is what I use for recording. I am on a new computer now, which is why that issue kind of made a resurgence. In the last several videos I've done, I've recorded on this new computer, but I want to get everything up and running again, at least to the level that I had it on my old one. But in this video, I just wanted to make some comments about some stuff. I do think that there are animals out there in the wild that that ordinary people aren't being told about. So I moved down here to East Tennessee a few years ago, and I've always kind of, even before moving down here, have been interested in Bigfoot or Sasquatch or whatever you want to call it. Different places around the world call it different things, the Yeti or what have you. It is not far-fetched to me to think that there could be large and very reclusive, hypersensitive primates out there in the wilder places of the world. And when I say hypersensitive, I mean hypersensitive to things like light, sound, and especially the electromagnetic fields that we have in our electronic devices, in our cell phones, in our cameras, and stuff like that. We know that there are animals that are very sensitive to electromagnetic fields and can sense them. And so for us to go hiking out in the wild with devices on us, or even just, making the normal level of noise that your average tourist makes, we advertise our presence and can probably be heard by some animals and detected from miles away. And so if they're very reclusive and they don't want contact with humanity, they can hide themselves pretty well. Apologies, a little coffee break there. My point being that there are certainly species out there that are undiscovered and unknown to human beings. As a young Earth creationist and a Bible believer, the biblical account says that everything was created during the 6 first days of the creation week, with humanity being the pinnacle of the material creation created on the 7th day. So at the time that Adam and Eve walked the earth, they were coexisting with every other type of creature that God had ever created. And so from a young earth creationist perspective, anything we see in the fossil record could still be out there somewhere. That is just the way it is. Now, of course, the world is vastly different now than it used to be. It used to have a more uniformly tropical climate, from what we can tell from the fossil record, and most likely a much greater oxygen content in the atmosphere, which and maybe even greater atmospheric pressure. These things would have let animals grow to a much larger size, and then just the lack of genetic load, or the buildup of defects in the genes over time down through the generations. Things were living longer back in the early days of the Earth. And we see this in the Bible, where people had lifespans of close to 1,000 years. I don't think we have. I think 969 years was Methuselah, the oldest recorded age in the Bible. And then there were points where God shortened lifespans, and then it just seems like lifespans as well were just naturally coming down. Also, as things like genetic load and disease and genetic diseases and more background radiation as the atmosphere changed and things like that. These things all have an effect, and now our lifespans are roughly about 80 years at this point in time. But the point that I'm trying to make is there's stuff out there that we don't know about, and or that are kind of on the fringe of collective consciousness, where people have had sightings of things or recorded the cries of animals, and it's not anything that we know or recognize. We just know it's something different, something new, and Bigfoot is kind of or Sasquatch, whatever you want to call it. I think usually I call it Sasquatch. I think that's just Bigfoot is a little bit too comical. The Yeti is too specific. That's more a Himalayan thing. I think Sasquatch is just a good universal term for this creature, a large reclusive ape-like creature, a primate of some kind, is what I think we're dealing with in that case. And it's a big thing here in East Tennessee. You see a lot of people with Sasquatch bumper stickers and paraphernalia, and you hear some strange stories too from people around here. There's a lady I was working with at an aerospace company here in Morristown, Tennessee. I'm not going to name the aerospace company, but if you look around, there's only one company to my knowledge in this area that has aerospace in the name, and that's the place that I worked. And there's a lady at work who, she and her husband were truckers before she retired from that job and started working at this aerospace company, and she told me a couple stories, things that happened to her and her husband that are pretty bizarre. It doesn't surprise me that there be animals out there, and in my other videos you can see that I am a believer that creatures that we might classify as dinosaurs or dragons or sea monsters, that these things could definitely still be out there and alive in the remote places of the world. The areas where we frequently travel, if you look at, for example, a light map of the Earth, where all the lights are, coming from the cities and stuff, there's a lot of dark spaces on the map where there just aren't people, or there aren't a lot of people. And the terrain is rugged, and people don't generally go in places where the terrain is very rugged. I've grown up hiking and camping, and I've hiked in some pretty rugged places. I've hiked, I've climbed around and explored areas where we're talking about very sheer, rocky faces, with waterfalls coming down them, and slick, dangerous areas. I've crawled around in scrub brush before, hunting deer, and hiked the Appalachian Trail, which is in places pretty rugged, but the Appalachian Trail is pretty tame compared to the mountains out west. There's just a lot of really rugged, remote territories where you're isolated. Your cell phone may or may not work, and you're off the grid. And Now, there may not be huge populations of some of these creatures out there, but there may still be small pockets where things are um, just living their lives apart from human contact, and they have not been um, seen, maybe in generations. And I do think I've studied especially the Loch Ness Monster and other marine type stuff because I wanted to be a marine biologist when I was younger. Um, it does seem like the Loch Ness, there's a channel there that connects it to the ocean, and it seems like it's sort of a nursery environment. The creatures don't live there year round, but they apparently shelter there seasonally with their young, and it's sort of a nursery, and then they return to the open sea. So we don't really know how large that population of those creatures is, but if you've never seen the Ryan's photographs, you should look that up. And basically, underwater motion cameras took some pictures of appendages and the body outline of one of these creatures. Dr. Roy Mackle from the University of Chicago uh, um, did a couple expeditions there to the Loch Ness, and they got some sonar readings of large creatures swimming at depth. They never really came up with anything conclusive. It is conclusive that there's something there off and on. Um, and footage still pops up even in the modern era. The most recent I saw was footage taken on an iPhone, and I think it was about 2015. So people are still seeing these things, and it's not just Loch Ness. There's other lakes at the same latitude or similar latitudes all around the world where people are seeing lake monsters, sort of a general category of sighting types. Speaking of Sasquatch, there was a point in time when I was very interested in moving to Alaska and working on the Alaska Marine Highway on one of their ferries. And I started going through the process for that and got all the paperwork and certifications and my TWIC card and all the things that you would need in order to do that. Quite a pile of certifications, um, transportation related, and then food certification related for that type of job. But working that job, I probably would have had to live in Kalispell, and Kalispell's on an island. And I've seen some unusual footage from Kalispell that seems to be a Sasquatch. And the problem with any of these things is people, let's face it, people in rural areas, farming communities and stuff, they're pretty hard up for entertainment. They get bored. And, maybe there's stories going around and then someone decides to do a hoax just for kicks. And unfortunately what happens in these situations is the hoax then just kind of discredits maybe dozens, maybe hundreds of previous sightings because now everyone's thinking all these must be hoaxes. That's not really logical. And anyway, the footage that I saw from Kalispell was clearly not a hoax. It was a large primate in an area of heavy brush, and there were a couple guys hiking this area, and this area was near a little stream that was kind of lower than the ground level and had kind of cut a channel. And this area was just heavily there's heavy brush in this area, and the noise of the stream, it seems, was covering up the noise of these guys' approach. And so they were able to capture the something quite large that looked ape-like. It was not a bear. There are bears in the area, but this was not a bear in the underbrush. And that's one of the most convincing videos that I've seen, and I've watched a lot of videos, some of which were definitely hoaxes and have been proven to be hoaxes. And one thing I also like to do is, when I can, find recordings of animal cries at night. This is something that animals use to communicate over distance with each other. Wolves do it, and other animals do it as well. In this Kalispell area, I've heard some real interesting animal cries recorded in that area that, they're no animal that I've ever heard, and I've heard wolves and coyotes, and big cats, and these animal noises are not any of those things. There is a project I'm working on right now. I'm not really going to say much more about it at this present time, but where I am in East Tennessee means that it's accessible to me, and I can actually maybe, depending on the financial situation and how things shake out with the job situation over the next couple months, I may actually be able to be in a position to do some hands-on stuff myself. And I'm not really going to say more about that or make any promises that I can't keep. So, just put that out there. And it's in a similar vein to what we're talking about here, but not 100% related. I will say that this area of East Tennessee is real interesting. I'm going to give you two specific examples. So I found a video online of a couple. They live about a county over from where I am, maybe one or two counties, but they're in this general East Tennessee area. They're not far at all. If I was to drive out to their property, it'd probably be about less than an hour to get there, so it's not far from me. This area, there's a lot of caves. I actually have a map of old Indian burial caves that pre-exists when they flooded the lakes. There's Cherokee Lake to the north of me and Douglas Lake down a little bit to the south. I think it's Douglas Lake is the name of that one. Anyway, this couple had a cave system on their property, and they liked just going in there and checking it out. They had some cool formations and stuff in there. And so they went in there one time and they saw an animal in there, and they weren't sure what it was. The husband was kind of a little more cautious. The wife kind of was going after it down into the cave, trying to see what it was. And then she kind of started screaming and came running back out. And apparently this creature, whatever it was as afraid of her as she was of it. And she described it. She said it was covered with dark, shaggy fur, but had a human-like face and big claws. And that description sounds really terrifying, when you just put it into words. But it's actually, as it turns out, she described this thing, and I don't know if it was her who drew the picture of it, or if they got an artist or something to do it based on her description. But turns out what she saw was almost certainly a species of sloth, which isn't that crazy. And here's why. Firstly, this area is known to have had populations of sloths in the past. And then here in America, a lot of people don't realize this. There's just all manner of exotic animals that people bring into this country. There's more tigers in captivity in the U.S. than are alive in the wild today, is my understanding. Just private people owning big cats just for the heck of it, which is insane. And then there's areas of the country where people get these pets, reptiles especially, which, unless they die, a reptile keeps growing and will get bigger its entire life. All reptiles, well, I won't say all because that's too universal of a statement, but most reptiles, they just keep growing and growing. So people get these cute little alligators, and they're relatively small, and then they get too big and they're too expensive to feed, and so people release them, for instance, in Cherokee Lake, which actually happened. Someone did release alligators in Cherokee Lake, and they found a caiman in Cherokee Lake at one point in time. That's a lake that's 5 minutes from where I live. It's crazy to think about that. And so whether this sloth is a naturally occurring, like there's just been a population of these very shy animals in the area for a long time, and this is one of them, or whether it's an exotic animal that someone brought out here as a pet and then it was freed at some point or whatever, I don't know. But it sounds like, from her description, from the picture that they drew of this thing, it sounds pretty clear that she's seeing this sloth, and it does have a kind of human-like face. It's got big dark eyes. The fur of its face is white, but the fur of the rest of its body is a darker color. And then, yeah, it's a sloth, so it's got 3 big claws. Well, I think sloths don't all necessarily have 3. But I believe this particular one had three large claws that she noticed anyway. So that's a thing that happened. I'm pretty sure that account, I don't remember the exact time frame of it, but I think it happened in the last few years here, a fairly recent thing. And then going back generations, there used to be a population of black panthers here in East Tennessee, and supposedly they're all extinct now. But my parents have a neighbor who's lived here his whole life, and he said when he was a boy, yeah, he saw a black panther, and there are still people around who apparently claim to have seen them every once in a while, but these are very shy, reclusive, and potentially, possibly nocturnal animals. I don't really know a ton about them, but and these are this is a pretty rugged area. So I'm in Morristown, which is a fairly old, it's one of the oldest cities in the U.S. actually. Pretty old city, and then north of me is Cherokee Lake, and north of that there's this region where there's just these ridges of mountains in parallel east to west, and very rugged terrain, rugged country. And then obviously there's mountains to the east of me, mountains to the south of me. Uh, this is rugged country where people occasionally see strange things out there. Um, Creatures, thought to have been extinct for a really long time. Now, the reason I opened this video showing you this hog footage here and just the quality of it is because I want you to understand that if this is technology that is accessible to civilians. If you have enough money, you can get this level of technology for yourself. Understand that the government has a level of technology that is above and beyond this. Like, they have platforms that are high above us, miles above us potentially, that can zoom way in and get this level of detail from that distance away, and thermal and all manner of other the ability to record all manner of other spectrums of light and what have you. And the reason I bring this up is because there are a lot of sightings of Sasquatch and other cryptids. So cryptid is just an animal that's unknown to science, basically, is an easy definition of it. Some people think that some cryptids are supernatural, that they're actually like demonic entities or animals from the spiritual plane that are making their way into our reality and then passing back and forth. I'm not really 100% ready to jump on that bandwagon yet. While it is a possibility, and I'm not going to rule it out exclusively, I think it's just much more likely that these species are hypersensitive, potentially nocturnal, and very reclusive. And if they're hypersensitive to human technology like lights, sound, and electronics, and they're living in a remote area, and they're nocturnal, and they're just very wary and avoid contact with people. So, if they're more of there are animals that are just really wary of, because they're more what you would think of as a prey animal or an herbivore. And then there's some animals that are wary and they avoid encounters with other species. They are actually apex predators, but they're ambush predators. And so if they, if you spot them before they spot you, it's kind of like the jig is up. They're coming at you might be more trouble than it's worth, and they just wouldn't bother. They prefer to stay unnoticed, and if they want to interact with you, they want it to be on their terms, taking you unawares, basically. But anyway, I do think there's stuff out there, and I do think that the government is aware of some of these populations of creatures. And the reason I say that, one reason that a lot of people say that these creatures are supernatural is because they are seen in conjunction with other unusual sightings like orbs, or balls of light, and UFO craft. And so my counter to that, because I'm just trying to trim all this down, evaluate it rationally, and come to a conclusion that fits reality, that's not a superstitious or unfounded view of things. So I've already done research into the origins of like UFO saucer type craft and these metal orb type UFO craft or Foo Fighters or whatever you want to call them, which can be just a metallic silvery looking orb that defies gravity, or it can actually be a ball of light because those orbs can be wreathed in flames that are any number of colors: purple, orange, white, yellow, red. These have all been reported before. And because people are assuming that these balls of light and these UFO craft relate to aliens or relate to the supernatural, then they are associating, if those things are seen in conjunction with sightings of these unusual cryptid animals, they're now associating those things together and saying, well, it's all got to be supernatural. And I don't think that's the case at all. Understand that the government has the entire surface of the earth most likely surveilled at all times with not only just normal cameras, but probably with thermal and any number of other things. Or if not the entire surface of the earth, certainly a large percentage of it, and they can focus scrutiny, kind of like the Eye of Sauron, on a particular area and gain a lot of information about what's going on in that particular area. And if there are species out there that are unknown to the general population at large, the government is probably aware of them because they're constantly playing with their toys, looking at these areas and just seeing what's out there. And I'm sure that they have seen some of these things using thermal technology and other technologies. And it's not outrageous to think that with some of these populations of unusual creatures, especially if there's something that could be a predator species, that the government may be studying them much more closely. And when I say the government, I mean levels above our government. I mean the people that are running these anti-gravitic programs with these silver orbs and these stealth type UFO craft and other things, which have capabilities that I've talked about in my other videos, especially in my series on restricted technology. And you can see those videos if you haven't seen those already. My point is, I do think that there are animals out there, and I think they are animals. I don't think that they're supernatural. I do believe that Sasquatch is out there. I don't think it's a supernatural thing. I think it's an animal. And I think these people who occasionally see it, but then also have at the same time or in the same time frame, like an unusual UFO or ball of light sighting, I think those are related in that there are craft and devices in the vicinity of these creatures that are being used to study and surveil them. And so when people encounter these creatures, the shadow government powers that are running these dark technology programs, they are studying the interactions of humans with these populations. So they're in the area there, maybe with their their silver orb drone, recording what's going on and seeing how these animals interact with people and stuff like that. And I think with a lot of this stuff, it's just easier for the government to sweep it under the rug and pretend that this stuff doesn't exist and keep it from the rest of us. I think that's easier for them than trying to eradicate these creatures or what have you. Let's face it, the government has been very bipolar in a sense in how it treats endangered species and so forth. It's not always rational what the government does. There are times when the government seems to prioritize the lives of certain animal populations over the lives of people. It's just not far-fetched to me based on what I know about human nature and how conservation works or is supposed to work or has worked in the past or whatever, to think that the government does know about populations of unusual creatures out there, and it just chooses to sit on that information, not tell the rest of us, and then study those things on their own, trying to restrict that knowledge basically to themselves. I do think that let me put it this way, there's enough points of data going in a direction that I think this is a fairly logical conclusion. But the points that I want to make is I do emphasize that these cryptids, I think they're animals. I don't think that they are demons in corporeal form, coming through from another realm or anything like that. I do believe that they are actually just animals. And as I said, I think the government's aware of them. Now, are some of these creatures potentially government-created hybrids? That is something that an idea that a lot of people in the cryptid communities are putting out there. And I think that it is at least possible. We know for a fact that the development of human-pig hybrids is a real thing that people are working on, trying to create creatures whose organs can be harvested to basically keep people alive, for transplanting into people. Or at least that is the justification behind these. Really, I would call it an abomination of science to try to cross humans and pigs. And I don't know how the extent of that technology. Are they just growing individual organs in a lab somewhere? Okay, that's pretty gray. Maybe growing organs that are a hybrid organ, porcine and human genetic material. Okay, that's kind of a gray area. But then if you're actually creating a human-pig hybrid, like the whole organism, and then just keeping it sedated for its lifetime and harvesting organs as needed from it, like a living blood bag, basically. That's pretty dark. I would call that an abomination. And there's no doubt that programs like this exist. There's no doubt that there are places where there are body farms. We see this stuff hinted at in fiction, like in vampire movies, where the vampires have a blood farm somewhere, and it's all these humans just hanging from their feet in rows on racks and being drained of blood or whatever. There's no doubt in my mind that there's places like that where people are being harvested for their organic resources. I'm sure it exists, human nature being what it is. But these are all things that we don't know with absolute certainty. So I'll just say that the possibility that some of these creatures are weird hybrids or government programs where they've created these chimeras using genetic modification and then released them into the wild just to see what happens could be. It could very well be. We just won't know until actual samples are acquired, whether we're talking a live specimen or what have you. Now, it's my understanding that people have acquired samples from presumably Sasquatch or other creatures and then had them analyzed, and the labs generally come back with something along the lines of, well, we weren't able to get an exact match, but the closest we could find was a black bear, and so therefore we think that this is just an unusual variant of a black bear, and that's a fairly typical outcome. I've heard, different variations of that account many times. Eventually someone will get some hard evidence, a body, a corpse, or body parts, or bag one of these things and take its head or whatever. And there's actually an Idaho congressman that at one point put a bounty on Sasquatch and said, if you can get me one. I think it was pretty hefty, like 15 grand or something like that. We do live in a time of great disclosure. I just wanted to put my thoughts out there now, and we will see if events corroborate or substantiate my logical process. But I just thought I'd share this, and then we'll see if the audio is on this is good. Anyways, thanks for bearing with me with my ramblings, and I hope you found this to be interesting. I will talk to you guys later. Have a great week.